This is a story called Ram Khilawan by Sadat Hasan Manto. It was a Sunday morning and I was in my one-room dwelling in suburban Bombay. All I had was a charpoy and a table and a chair, and the room was filled with the stench of dead bed bugs. Having nothing to do, I was going through some papers and I came across a photograph of Said Bhaijan. With the intention of putting it up on one of these bare walls, I set it aside on the table. And then I waited for my dhobi to arrive. You see, in those days of poverty, I only had clothes to run a week. And if the dhobi didn't come, I wouldn't have any fresh clothes for the week to follow. And what's more, my wedding was being negotiated today. I had to go to my aunt's house in Mahim. If the dhobi didn't come, then how would I get married? But there was one more reason why I was particularly afraid, and it was because I hadn't paid my dhobi in several weeks. What if he decided to keep my clothes in lieu of the money that I owed him? But my fears were soon put to rest. There was a knock on the door, and the dhobi walked in. He was a young man, and he brought my bundle of clothes, set it down on the floor, untied it, took out my clothes to keep them on the table, and he noticed the picture of Said Bhaijan. And he said, "Hey, this is Barrister Said Salim." I said, "Yes, you know Said Bhaijan?" He nodded his head and said, "Barrister Said Salim used to stay in Kolaba. I washed his clothes for 2 years. And when he left, he gave me a turban, a kurta and a dhoti, all new." I told him that Said Bhaijan was my brother. And Dhobi sort of didn't believe me. He looked around incredulously at my one-room apartment and thought, how could Said Bhaijan, who lived in Kolaba, and I be brothers? And I had to explain to him that all 5 fingers of the hand are not the same. And my brother was a barrister who now migrated to Fiji, whereas I was a struggling writer. Dhobi nodded and turned to leave. As he was leaving, I put my hand in my pocket and realized that I had about 8 annas in it. But if I gave him the money, I wouldn't have money for the bus to Mahim. And after all, my marriage was being organized. So I decided against it. But I wasn't without a conscience. So I called after the dhobi and I said, "Dhobi, I hope you're keeping accounts." Dhobi turned back and said, "Sahab, I don't keep accounts. Whatever you give me, I'll take. I washed Barrister Said Salim's clothes for 2 years, and when he left, he gave me a dhoti, a kurta and a turban, but in those 2 years, I never kept accounts. Whatever he gave me, I took." And saying that, with a salam, my dhobi left. It turned out to be a good Sunday after all. I went to Mahim, and my marriage was fixed up, and I got married in due course. And along with marriage, my fortunes changed as well. I seemed to get a lot more scripts to write. And with the affluence, we moved to a better place, lived in a better locality, and the dhobi started getting paid on time. I told Begum about the generosity of my dhobi during my bachelor days. But Begum was most cynical. She said, "Of course they won't keep accounts. That's how they cheat bachelors like you. I'll teach them a lesson," she said. So one month, when about 100 clothes had been washed, she called the dhobi and said, "Dhobi, here is your money for 60 clothes." The dhobi touched the money to his forehead and turned to leave. And Begum called him back and said, "Dhobi, why don't you keep accounts? You had washed 100 clothes. Here's the balance money." The dhobi took the money, touched it to his forehead once again and said, "Begum Sahab, I don't keep accounts. Whatever you give me, I'll take. I worked for Barrister Said Salim for 2 years and I never kept accounts. And when he left, he gave me a dhoti, a kurta and a turban, all new. I'm now so happy that your Sahab has also become a big man." And with that, Begum and Dhobi formed a bond that would last for many years. They became good friends. In fact, there was once a time when the dhobi didn't come for several weeks, and Begum became quite worried. So she asked around some other dhobis and found out that he was quite unwell. So she took her maid and her driver in a car and went in search of the dhobi. And she finally found him, and he was very ill, and she took him to the hospital and made sure that he got nursed back to health. The dhobi was forever grateful that Begum Saab took him in her own motor car to the hospital. He was forever indebted. Many more years passed, and unfortunately, the partition was upon us. Along with the partition came the riots between Hindus and Muslims. And Bombay didn't escape from it either. Begum got quite worried and went back to Lahore to her maike. And she pleaded with me to follow as well. But I still had some scripts on hand. So I promised that I would finish the work that I had on hand and then follow in a short while. I was also worried for my dhobi. I stayed in a predominantly Muslim neighborhood, and dhobi was obviously a Hindu. So one day I told dhobi, I said, "Dhobi, I think you should stop coming now." Dhobi characteristically told me, "Saab, you don't worry about me. Nothing will happen to me. And when you write to Begum Saab, please tell her that Ram Khilawan gave his salam." Ram Khilawan. I realized that for the first time in 20 years, I realized that my dhobi has a name, Ram Khilawan. In the next few weeks, I actually finished off all the scripts that I had. And I decided why not now leave for Lahore, because Begum was constantly sending me telegram after telegram. So I decided, let me go to Lahore before waiting for Sunday. And as usual, my clothes were with the dhobi. So I set out to Mahalakshmi, because I knew that's where he lived, to find the dhobi and get my clothes back so that I could take the steamer and go off to Lahore. I reached there around evening time. It was not yet curfew. And as I asked around whether anyone knew where Ram Khilawan stayed, I saw a mob approaching. They looked quite drunk to me, and they all carried bamboos and hammers in their hand, and they were shouting slogans against the Muslims. But pretending it was nothing to do with me, I asked one of those people as they passed by, "Excuse me, do you know where Ram Khilawan stays?" And the man looked at me and caught my collar and said, "Who are you?" I said, "Ram Khilawan is my dhobi, I'm looking for him." And the man who caught my collar said, "Ram Khilawan may be your dhobi, but whose dhobi are you? A Hindu's dhobi or a Muslim's dhobi?" I said, "Ram Khilawan is my dhobi. He's been washing my clothes for 20 years. When he was sick, my Begum took him in a car to the hospital." "Oh, no, not my Begum. My wife, my Mem-Sab took him to the hospital." And as I said those words, I realized that I was being so wretched that I would sacrifice my soul to save my skin. And that wretchedness made me feel reckless. And I said, rather bravely, "I am a Muslim." And when I said that, the mob broke into a cry, "Kill him! Kill him!" But the man who held my collar said, "No, Ram Khilawan will kill him." And so a cry went out for Ram Khilawan, "Ram Khilawan! Ram Khilawan!" And from a distance, I saw my own dhobi, Ram Khilawan, appear. And he too was walking in a gait which quite obviously made it evident to me that he was quite drunk, and he carried a hammer in his hand as he approached us. And I shouted as he came close by, I said, "Ram Khilawan!" He just came up to me and grabbed my collar and said, "Ram Khilawan indeed," and raised the hammer. And with all hope draining, I told him, "Dhobi, you don't recognize me." When I said that, he peered at my face and said, "Saab? Saab? This is not a Muslim. This is Saab. This is Begum Saab. When I was sick, Begum Saab took me to the hospital. He's not a Muslim. He's Saab." And he started fighting with his friends as to what should be done with me. And in that confusion, I managed to escape and I ran all the way home. I have never been more scared in my life. This is the closest I had ever come to death. I decided this was it. If there was any doubt in my mind, I had to go to Lahore. There was no way I could continue to live in Bombay. I called for my steamer ticket for the next day, and I was determined that I would leave and never return to Bombay. The next day, I waited impatiently at home, packing whatever I could carry, waiting for my steamer ticket to be delivered. There was a knock on the door, and I thought it was my steamer ticket, and I opened the door, and there was Ram Khilawan, my dhobi. And he had my bundle of clothes. Refusing to look me in the eye, he brought in the bundle and placed it on the floor. He untied it, took out the clothes, set them aside, took a few steps back, and stopped and said, Sahab, you're going? And I told him rather matter of factly, yes, Dhobi, I'm going by the streamer today itself, and I won't be back. I'm going forever. Dhobi stood there and said, Sahab, I want to tell you one thing. Sahab, it's not our fault, Sahab. Sahab, these businessmen, they come and they give us free liquor. They give us free liquor and make us all drink. Sahab, who will say no to free alcohol? We all drink, and when we are drunk, they tell us, go kill the Muslims. Sahab, it's not our fault, Sahab, it's not our fault. And Sahab, when you tell Begum, Sahab, please don't tell Begum, Sahab, that... He choked and turned around and headed for the door. As he was leaving, I realized I had to pay him. So I reached for my wallet and said, Dhobi, wait. But Dhobi was gone. That day, I left Bombay forever indebted to my Dhobi, Ram Khilawan.